Yo, it's your boy TTK and welcome back to another Pokemon video. Today we're going to be doing the MRL Season 15 Amethyst Power Rankings, and the reason why I'm doing the Amethyst Power Rankings is because of the fact I'm also in this division. And if you guys want to see the other divisions, just let me know, but I'm doing my division first because, you know, I'm the one that's in it. But yeah, won't keep the intro too long. I'm just going to tell you guys how I'm going to basically do these power rankings. So essentially we're going to look at each of these drafts, and obviously we'll look at it by type and everything, and discuss like what's good about their draft, what, you know, I think like is a bit questionable about their drafts as well. Like at the end of the day, it's like my opinion, so if you end up disagreeing with me, let me know as well. I'd like to see your perspective on some of these drafts as well, whether you're in the Amethyst division or in any of the lower divisions as well. I also like the way that the season 11 power rankings were. Like this was the doc for the season 11 power rankings, which was for the Amethyst division as well. So it's a thing where I'm going to be separating it into like different categories, like in terms of my notes and what I'm going to be saying. It'll be more generalized, but like obviously I'm going to try and focus on how the offense is, how the defense is, how hazard removal is looking, how hazard control, well not hazard control, hazard game is looking, speed tiers and momentum, how they're going to C-team the other types in the division, because that's also pretty important. That's the whole concept of MRL in general, and then anything else I have to say about their drafts in general. But yeah, let's get into it, guys. Hopefully you enjoy. Leave a like down below, subscribe to the channel, join the kingdom. We're on the way to 500 subscribers by the end of the year. But yeah, on to the first draft. Alright guys, so for the first draft we got the Smatte Lamazza unmasking group, you know, team from Teamcap here, and Teamcap chose Mono Bug. Now Teamcap, the last time I actually faced them, there was actually a video on my channel, that was in season 11. He was using Rock, so he likes to use some of these lower viability monotypes in these tournaments from what I'm seeing, and he's decided to go Bug this time. Now Bug is an interesting one, I'll say that, just because of the fact that like it's not one of the stronger types in terms of offense. Like 7 types resist Bug. Fortunately for Teamcap, there isn't actually that many types in this division that actually resist Bug. You know, you still have fighting, fire. Yeah, those are the only 2 types that actually resist, and fairy as well. So you have 3 types in the division that resist Bug as your stab options, and you also have 2 out of 3 of your weaknesses also being drafted in this division, which are rock and fire. So we're definitely going to be trying to focus on how Teamcap manages to do any of those in terms of the fire matchup. I'm the fire user, by the way, so and I'm also facing him this week, so we'll see what he brings for the fire matchup, because it is quite disadvantageous to him. But at the same time, I have to respect the matchup as well, because I have to respect the fact that he has a Cleaver and a Raquanid on his team, and these guys are pretty hard hitting Pokemon, all things considered. Cleaver's Stone Axe is going to be a very annoying thing for my matchup specifically, but the fact that you know, in terms of the hazard game, Cleaver just clicks an attack and rocks up instantly. Pretty good thing to have. You know, I'm not going to speak about the Volcarona, because Volcarona #1 is the only tier 1 bug type, so it's pretty much a mandatory bring on pretty much every bug draft. So there's not much to say about Volcarona other than the fact that, you know, it's probably one of the most scariest Pokemon in the tier, in the format, to be honest. Like, you just set up, you have access to hidden power to cover, you know, a lot of the matchups that you're going to be facing, neutral or disadvantageous matchups, and it's just an annoying Pokemon to take down as well, because you could go bulky. It's still relatively fast and it has reliable recovery. So yeah, Volcarona is a Pokemon that pretty much all of the, you know, players in the division have to respect. Cleaver, you know, gets up the auto rock, so it's pretty good in that aspect, and Raquanid is helping out with the fire matchup because of its ability Water Bubble, which halves fire damage, so it ends up being resisting fire attacks. Obviously super strong physical fire attacks, especially in Sun. Raquanid ain't that guy, unfortunately, but you know, like for other, you know, types and you know, people in the division where they have fire coverage, for example, to just kind of click versus Bug, you know, Raquanid is going to take those non-stab attacks pretty easily. Bug is also, you know, one of the few types that can utilize sticky webs as well, so that's also something that most of the division have to look out for, even if people have reliable recovery, I mean reliable removal, because it's just kind of annoying to deal with, especially for your grounded Pokemon. In terms of defense, I mean, Bug types, again, isn't the bastion of defensive stats, but at least you have a Raquanid that acts as a fire resist to a certain extent, unless you're facing physical fire moves and sun. Omaldo is also, you know, a fire neutral bug type, which is pretty useful to have. It's also flying neutral. Not that that particularly matters, seeing how there's no flying type player in this division, but you know, if you want to click Hurricane, or you know, other people have flying types to beat the bug types, you know, Omaldo is taking those hits kind of well as well. Galissapod is also a water bug type, which obviously can take fire type attacks neutrally. So, you know, altogether, you know, the defense for bug isn't actually that bad when you draft these Pokemon like Araquanid, Galissapod, and especially Mega Sizzle, since that gets rid of your rock weakness and that also gets rid of your flying weakness as well. But yeah, in terms of overall what they've drafted for bug, I have the list of like pretty much every single Pokemon for the tiers. Tier 2 pick is Cleavor. Like, realistically, you also picked up Scolipede as another tier 2 pick, so there isn't really much you're missing out on here. Buzzwole could have been interesting, but I think the fighting team has Buzzwole regardless, so it's not that bad. Your tier 3 pick of Raquin is pretty much the best thing you have there. Rabombi was also your secondary tier 3 pick as well. Could have picked up Heracross as well, potentially, because of the fact that you didn't pick up Buzzwole, but at the same time there's a Slitherwing, which is also a tier 2 pick, which Teamcap seemed to be able to have afforded. Tier 4 Omaldo is pretty good as well. There's other, you know, bug types that can actually do decent in tier 4, like Fortress and Excavalier, both another bug steel types. But when you have Mega Sizzle, there's not really any reason to draft any other bug steel types unless necessary. And then like tier 5, there's just a long list of these guys. But in terms of Vivillon's role on the team, Vivillon's just annoying in general. So obviously you're going to have a mon with like almost guaranteed sleep. Can set up quite reliably as well, and when hidden powers come into play as well, Vivillon's coverage issues of, you know, stab being pretty annoying to switch, pretty easy to block, you know, that gets fixed. And in terms of the Mega, as you guys know, there's 4 bug type Megas: Sizzle, Pinsir, Heracross, and Beedrill. Sizzle's a tier 1 Mega and probably the best Mega for you to draft, just because of, again, its defensive typing for the type and its damage output. The rest aren't really worth considering, in my opinion. Beedrill's kind of too niche, Heracross is kind of slow, and you can just cover, like, wasting your Mega slot on Heracross when you have Buzzwole in tier 2 doesn't really make much sense. And then Pinsir, obviously, Pinsir hits very hard, but it's just that you kind of need more support for it because it's times for weak to Stealth Rocks when Mega Evolving. But yeah, removal again, not too bad. Spin or Maldo, Defog Mega Sizzle, potentially Defog Vivillon, Volcarona, Cleavor if you want to fit it. But again, removal on bug is interesting. It just really depends what you want to run, but Sizzle's probably your best bet because it's not weak to rock. But overall, I like Teamcap's draft. Some pretty fun bonds here for sure, and you got your necessary picks as well. Scolipede, again, one of my favorite bug types, and Galissapod and Lockett. Like, these guys are just very hard Pokemon to switch into. So yeah, overall, I'm a fan of Teamcap's draft. I think this is the best. Well, I'm not going to say this is the best you could have gotten. Like, it's very hard to determine the best draft. Again, it really depends on your opponents in your division at the same time, but I would say I would have tried to focus on these mons if I was drafting bugs. So yeah, overall, I like the draft. Our next draft in this division is Ekans of Ecruteak by Sai246. Sai, the only reason why I actually know Sai is because of some other draft leagues that we've been in, and the fact that this guy's favorite Pokemon is Ekans. Fortunately, he's gone ground and he did not draft, you know, Ekans' adjacent cousin Sandaconda, which is quite jarring to me in my opinion. But, you know, he seems to know what he's doing. Obviously, ground is one of the stronger monotypes, and I'm looking at a lot of these tier 1 ground picks, and there's just a lot of dangerous Pokemon here. As you can see, he decided to draft Landorus Incarnate, which is one of the strongest ground types of all time. For good reason. Sheer Force Life Orb hits very hard. Not many Pokemon want to switch into Landorus, or they're getting O-code most of the time, and Lando can easily just 2-hit cure most defensive Pokemon anyway. So yeah, very dangerous Pokemon to have. Has that elusive 101 speed tier, getting the jump on base 100s, and you know, its coverage is pretty good as well, especially when you want to give it hidden power. It has access to Nasty Plot, it has Earth Power, Sludge Wave, Focus Blast, and also has Gravity to support his teammate Excadrill, which we'll get onto a bit later as well. But obviously this is a sand-based team. You see the Hippowdon and the Sand Rush Excadrill. Also have Hippopotas. To be fair, I don't know what the point of having Hippopotas is if you have Hippowdon. Surely there were other tier 5s you could have gotten in that slot, but we'll be going over that a bit later. But yeah, in terms of what ground wants to try and cover, obviously water, grass are in this division, so you kind of have to prepare for those quite effectively. But yeah, ground always will have a harder time against grass than water, just because you have like less options for grass compared to water. At least with water, you have water absorb mons such as Seismitoad and Clodsire here, and even Quagsire has water absorb as well, and also a water type neutral mon in Mega Garchomp. But compared to grass, you don't really have grass immunities on ground, and at the same time you only have 3 grass neutral Pokemon. One can be very much exploited by Ice Beam, aka Torterra, and then Excadrill isn't really the most bulkiest Pokemon in the world. Like, most of the time it's just going to want to set up in sand and just Oko everything there. But you know, at least the water matchup is covered to a certain extent. There's no ice in this division, but at the same time, water can easily just take ice moves. You know, it makes the matchup a lot harder. I think water also has Ogerpon Wellspring, but you know, that's a disadvantageous matchup to Sai. So at the end of the day, if he loses that one, he's really, the water person's not gaining much points in the division anyway, so it's not that deep. But yeah, so overall, like I said earlier, it's a sand team. You know, you have your Hippowdon, Excadrill. Excadrill's pretty much outspeeding most things under sand at +2 speed, and is very dangerous to switch into when supported by Landorus Gravity. So at that point, immunities to ground. There's no flying div, but again, electric is probably going to have some floating Pokemon like Rotom Wash, for example. You know, Gravity's going to ignore that, and Excadrill's probably going to have a fun time versus electric. So yeah, pretty hard to kind of stop Sai's team when it gets going. Again, I have to face this as a fire type team, so you know, good luck to me, innit? But yeah, if there's anything I could say about this, obviously Mega Garchomp is a tier 2 Mega, so you don't actually end up spending any of your 400 extra points, and it seems like you got a tier 1, you got a tier 2, you got a tier 5, and you got a tier 4, so that works out. But in terms of Hippopotas as your tier 5, you could have definitely chosen some better Pokemon in my opinion, just because if you have a Hippowdon as your tier 2, I don't really see the point of having Hippopotas, especially due to the fact that, like, let's say you want to replace Hippowdon with another tier 2 like Iron Treads or Nidoking, or any of these other tier 2s like Tinglu, for example. I guess you could say Hippopotas as your backup is fine, but at the same time, you never really need both of them at the same time. It's not like Hippopotas can get sniped by someone else in the division just because of the fact that they're both mono-ground Pokemon, so no one else can pick them up. But yeah, there was definitely more useful Pokemon you could have picked for Hippopotas. Golem, Gabite, Alolan Dugtrio, but again, you have Dugtrio in your tier 5 slot anyway, so you can't do that due to species clause. But yeah, all I'm saying is that there was more useful tier 5s. Even Rhydon, for example, would have been a lot more useful than Hippopotas in my opinion. Looking at the actual like rest of the Mons here, not the extra picks, Seismitoad in terms of your tier 3 is probably your best bet. Well, you get 2 tier 3s and you chose like 2 of the best ones. You got Torterra for the water neutral, and also a Shell Smash to, you know, be able to beat water quite effectively, and you have Seismitoad as the water immunity. You can't really go wrong with that. Gastrodon was also an option, but you know, I don't really know what Seismitoad is doing over Gastrodon in this slot. I guess you have a more offensive water immunity on your team, which isn't too bad. The thing is, ground actually has good mons, so it's a thing where, like, you have Diggersby in tier 3, and I think he had Diggersby before, but he swapped out for Torterra. For obvious reason, the water matchup is pretty important in that aspect. Zygarde 10 was also a possibility, but you already have a Dragon Ground type in Mega Garchomp, which, again, is still a Garchomp at the end of the day. You don't even have to Mega it to keep that 102 speed tier, so you're not really losing much, and Garchomp is definitely the best Mega for you to choose out of the ground Megas, because Swampert, there's no point of choosing Swampert when it's tier 1 and Water's probably taking that. Steelix in tier 3, again, it's not a bad Mega, but you don't really need it, and Camerupt is just not that good in general, so yeah, Garchomp's probably the best that you get there. Dugtrio in tier 5, again, like, ground still has decent mons in tier 5, but probably a Alolan Dugtrio would have been a bit better. It is slower by 10 speed, but at the same time, Dugtrio is the fastest ground type fully evolved mon, so I guess having that 120 speed tier rounds up, because the team is generally slow, especially without sand, so having something at the 120 speed tier is pretty good, because you outspeed Valiant, you outspeed Rowan Moon. I mean, I'm just giving examples. Rowan Moon ain't in this div, there's no Dragon or Dark Draft, but, you know, outspeed Cinderace as well, which is at 119 speed. But yeah, overall, I do like the draft. Mono ground is definitely my favorite type to use in monotype in general. It's just that I don't think the Hippopotas is necessary when you have Hippowdon, but other than that, I think the team is pretty solid. Clado's an interesting choice because its defensive typing pretty much does nothing for ground, but you know, it acts as removal option when realistically the only removal option you have without it is Spin Excadrill, or you could go Defog Lando Eye. But do you really want to be wasting your slot on Defog for Landorus Eye? So yeah, overall I still think Size draft is still pretty good at the end of the day. Alright, so we've made it on to Yves Saint Lampent by Freeday. Again, Freeday is one of the better players that I'm aware of in this division. Not to say the people in my division aren't good players. This is the top division after all. But, you know, I remember Freeday from some other APM draft, I believe. Maybe that wasn't Freeday, that was someone else. But either way, Ferry, I went Ferry in the last MRL season that I played. Again, I didn't really like Ferry's playstyle. I kind of just went screens HO, and it's just the way that you play Ferry. But I think Freeday has gotten out of that sort of thing, because he didn't draft Klefki, he didn't draft Grimmsnarl either. So a screensless Ferry team, you could definitely do a lot of innovation with that compared to what I was doing in season 12. But yeah. In terms of Fairy's tier 1s, there's literally only 4 tier 1s, and Electric took Tapu Koko, and Psychic took Tapu Lele. So you're left with Iron Valiant and Tapu Fini, and I think Fighting also took Iron Valiant, so you're left with Fini, and, you know, Fini is not a bad Pokemon by any means. It's a very bulky mon. You know, it's gonna do a lot for you. Has Nature's Madness, has Taunt to shut down, you know, defensive play. Draining Kiss as well. Like, Fini is just a very good support Pokemon to have, and yeah, it's well, when you're only left with the last tier 1 Fairy, you kind of just have to pick what you get. But, you know, Fini's not a bad Pokemon. It's also assisted by Azumarill in terms of the Water Fairy typing, so, you know, it helps out with the Steel neutrality. Not like we have Steel in the division, but again, coverage moves are always a thing, so having 2 Fairy types already not weak to Fairy is a good idea. Whimsicott, you know, Prankstermon, Annoyingmon, with Hatterene as well, pretty solid as well. In terms of tier 3s, these are probably some of the best that you can get. Again, Klefki's tier 3, but Freeday didn't want to go, you know, like screens HO basically. Tinkaton got picked up anyway, so that's in the additional slots. But yeah, there's not much else in tier 3 that you'd want to use. Like Gardevoir, I guess, like could replace the Hatterene, but Hatterene's ability to bounce back hazards when Fairy isn't really particularly known for having the best hazard removal options, because you're going to be stuck with Defog, Fini, and Whimsicott, so it's just best for you to have a Magic Bounce Pokemon to prevent Spike Stack. But again, this thing is not going to block Stone Axe anyway, but, you know, any other hazard control, setting options, Hatterene will be able to stop. Tier 4, there's only 4 tier 4 Fairy types. There's Comfey, Pheasantipity, Floor Eternal, and Florges. Florges could have been nice as just that massive special, like, sort of defense mon, but at the same time you have Pheasantipity and Tinkaton. These guys aren't slouches in the defense department, and also Diancie, which also has 150 special defense. So I guess you choose Pheasantipity for the fact that, well, you know, it's Pheasantipity, like, it's actually not too bad of a Pokemon to have on your team. And then tier 5, Shinotic, I guess that covers the water matchup. But you already have like 3 water resist as well. But again, helps out with rock, is also a grass type, and electric has a pretty fun time versus, you know, fairy. So having that secondary electric resist doesn't really harm you either, especially when you have a Namorous in the back. In terms of speed tiers, again, Fairy's not particularly too fast. Like, we got an average speed tier of this team of 62, and to be fair, I said the average speed tiers of the other teams. Bug was 73, and Ground was 62. Not that these numbers really mean anything, but it's just to get the overall, like, view of how fast these teams are overall. But yeah, this Fairy team isn't particularly fast. The fastest one you have is Whimsicott at 116, and Namorous next at 106, so you do have that somewhat gap. You don't really have anything. Well, Whimsicott covers 110, and then after Enamorous you have Pheasantipity at 99, but most of the time Pheasantipity, Tinkaton, these guys have high speed, but they're mainly defensive Pokemon. So realistically, if you're not going offensive on these guys, the next fastest offensive threat is realistically like Tapu Fini at that point, but like even that's gonna be running defense a lot of the time. But Fairy doesn't really have fast ones, like realistically, so I can't really hold Freeday to that. Like again, like he has Whimsicott at 116, which isn't too bad, and Enamorous at 106. The rest kind of do it themselves. Azumarill also has priority and is quite bulky, so it doesn't necessarily need the speed, and also hits very hard. But yeah, if there's anything about this draft that I could say, I don't really see any blatant issues. It's just that like Fairy doesn't really have to worry about much of its type matchups in this division, just because of the fact that no one chose Poison or Steel. Fire could be an interesting one. Again, I'm Fire, so we'll see how they're able to play around that. But with two water types, one being Fini and Azumarill, like these guys are pretty dangerous Pokemon to have. But yeah, I think this will cover most of the you know, types in the division, and I'm confident to see Freeday do well without screens. But yeah, like I said, I'd even mentioned the hazard game too much. You have Diancie Spikes and Rocks, Tinkaton Rocks, Mega Mawile Rocks, but again, you know, Mawile is going to be attacking most of the time, and Fairy only has 3 tier 1 Megas. Again, you're probably thinking, oh, I forgot about Ordino and Altaria. They can only be used on Normal and Dragon respectively. But, you know, you chose a pretty strong Mega because Diancie was taken by Rock, and Mawile, again, just hits very hard and is probably the best Mega for you to choose due to its defensive attributes. Well, yeah, 3 days draft, pretty solid. Yeah, on to the next. Alright, here comes Electric. Electric, again, my bane of my existence. I remember I had to face Water versus Electric. Not a very fun game. When Electric has type matchup, is a very annoying type to take down in this draft format. But yeah, overall, this is just a typical terrain team. I don't think I've seen a single Amethyst you know, Electric draft without Tapu Koko, and you know, Electric was picking before Fairy, so it's not like Fairy could try and snipe Electric from Tapu Koko, but at the same time, they managed to pick up Koko Raichu. Can't really go wrong with that. Electric is pretty one-dimensional. Can't really go wrong with that. Like, even if the rest of these mons were kind of bad, and again, Golem is kind of bad, and the Dene, but, you know, Raichu Koko kind of gets the job done. You have Vikavolt for additional speed control, gets rid of that Webs. Magnezone, again, like, Fairy's also a type that Electric has to respect as well, because of the fact that, you know, there isn't really that many Electric types that resist Fairy, so it's a thing where you could just spam Fairy moves versus Electric and it will be a very tough time. But Magnezone bringing that resist to the table is pretty good for it. Again, Electric only has one weakness to Ground. Ground is in this division. There's good ways of playing around it. Electric immunity with the Zapdos, you know, potential Air Balloon with Magnezone, ground neutrality with Electrode, Hisui, and then obviously Vikavolt has Levitate. But like I mentioned with Size Draft, you know, Lando Eye possesses Gravity, so you're going to have to be careful with that. But regardless, even if Gravity is up, Vikavolt is not weak to Ground due to his bug typing. But yeah, in terms of that, like, again, Electric can only do so much. He didn't pick up Rotom Wash. I think Water picked up Rotom Wash. Let me just double check that quickly. I don't want to send you guys the wrong information. But yeah, not picking up Rotom Wash is very interesting, in my opinion. Just very interesting. Because it would be very helpful to have versus Ground and Rock as well. Not having Rotom Wash is very interesting. But at the same time, it's a tier 1 pick. And, you know, like, that's also what I'm not getting either, because at the same time, with the Mega slot, there's only tier 3 and tier 4 Megas, and when you have tier 3 and tier 4 Megas, they give you extra points to buy stuff. So I'm a bit confused why the Rotom wasn't brought, which is kind of crazy, but I guess you have a shot of, you know, swapping out your Zapdos or Iron Hands for a Rotom, because unfortunately Iron Hands and Zapdos are 2 tier 1s. But the fact that you don't actually go Rotom Wash is kind of crazy to me now that I'm looking at it, but we'll see how that actually works out for you in the end. But yeah, Electrode Hisui, very underrated Pokemon. I think it does deserve his tier 4 slot slightly, but at the same time 150 speed is insane. Hardly probably need any speed investment to outspeed anything. You could focus on bulk for the ground matchup for sure. Definitely have to be careful of Collard side though. You don't really do anything to that mon, to be honest with you. But yeah, Golem on the other hand, there's a lot of tier 5 ground electric types here, and I'm just like thinking, was this really the best option you had? I know electric lacks the hazard setting options on the type a lot. You know, you have Sandy Shocks for rocks and spikes, but again, Sandy Shocks is a tier 2 pick, so you kind of have to, like, if you're not picking Sandy Shocks, as you can see, Banana here chose 2 tier 1s and then 2 tier 5s. You're not really getting any of that hazard, you know, setting capabilities, which out of the tier 5s, literally only Golem and Stunfisk provide. I think Stunfisk would have been a better mon, in my opinion. You get a ground type, you know, you're not times 4 weak to ground, and you know, but at least on the other hand, Golem isn't weak to ice, for example, but is weak to fighting, which this team has decent enough switch-ins into. You have 2 fairy types, you have a flying type, and you have a bug type, so it's not really that bad. But yeah, Golem is here for necessity rather than the fact that it's actually good as a tier 5 pick, because you still have things like Pikachu in tier 5, Togedemaru Maru. I wish that one got rocks or spikes or something, and then, you know, yeah, the rest are just kind of bad, to be honest. Plus all mine and Luxray, like, these ones aren't really that good. But yeah, like I said, with the mega slot, electric is lucky because it only has 2 megas, which actually give you extra points, so you're able to actually pick up those 2 tier 1 picks that are pretty relevant to have. Iron Hands is incredibly bulky, can be customized to do pretty much everything, will be helpful in the rock matchup. Zapdos on the other hand gives you another you know, electric immunity, and it hits hard for the grass matchup as well. But yeah, overall, other than the fact that the hazard game is kind of weak, because that's just how electric is, unfortunately, unless you get Sandy Shocks, and the fact that there's no Rotom Wash, this draft is looking pretty good, to be honest. You know, you thought about covering your, you know, matchups with Fairy, Ground, obviously, and you still have some decent things to do, like Morpeko as well is also going to be pretty useful for the Psychic matchup as well. The average speed of this team is 77, not that that particularly means anything, but it is faster than the Bug and Ground team, obviously. But yeah, surprisingly, Electric is not the fastest draft on this team, but yeah, when you have mons like Magnezone, Vikavolt, they are bringing down the average, especially with like Alolan Golem as well and Mega Ampharos. But yeah, overall good team. Would be interesting to see the Rotom Wash though. Alright, we got the Sassuolo Iron Crown by Lamazza here. Mono fighting team, has the Iron Valiant pick as your tier 1, and fighting isn't really particularly lacking in the tier 1 fighting type. You have a Shifu Rapid Strike, Zamazenta Hero, Galarian Zapdos, Annihilate, even Great Tusk. Great Tusk wasn't even picked up by ground, so that would have been a pretty nice removal option off the bat, which also has Stealth Rocks at the same time. But yeah, Iron Valiant isn't particularly a bad pick, because when, you know, the type is somewhat lacking special attackers overall, like you have Keldeo, Iron Valiant, then like the next best thing is like Lucario, which again, Lucario is not a bad mon, but it's like, you know, is a bit too slow. The speed tier is pretty lacking, but Iron Valiant and Keldeo kind of make up for that. So you're running both of them, which is fine, and also like making sure Fairy doesn't get Iron Valiant is also a pretty good thing to have as well. In terms of the type matchup board for fighting has to worry about Fairy and Psychic. There's no flying in the division, and also Bug is somewhat annoying because Bug obviously resists fighting and vice versa as well. But yeah, the main things, Psychic and Fairy, what are the ways that Lamazza has dealt with those types? So in terms of Fairy, you have the Sneasler pick, which is pretty good, is a tier 1 fighting type, so it's going to do a lot of work. You know, 120 speed, can abuse the misty terrain that Tapu Fini is going to set, so maybe, you know, Freeday ends up not bringing Misty Surge Tapu Fini in case Sneasler just unburden procs Misty Seed. That would be pretty funny, but you know, Sneasler is going to be enough to deal with Fairy. If you look at Freeday's team for Fairy, you know, there's only 2 steel Fairy types. Again, these guys don't like taking CC either, so you know, you're gonna have to play around that. So yeah, Sneasel's a pretty good thing to have for that matchup. On the other hand, Dark, you have Scrafty here, which obviously is immune to Psychic, but you're gonna have to be careful at the fact that most Psychic types get Fairy coverage, which Scrafty's time for weak to. But yeah, you also have Cobalion helping out defensively as well. Cobalion being a fighting type that's not weak to Psychic or Fairy, so yeah, having Pokemon like that. It's pretty good for tier 3 especially. It's fast, it has pretty good bulk, has Stealth Rocks as well, so you know Cobalion's going to be very useful for covering those two matchups. So overall, you know, I'd say it's pretty good. Fairy's going to have to really be careful with the Sneasler, especially with Unburden, and then, you know, Psychic has to find a way of dealing with Cobalion, but you know, when you have something like Mega Gallade, it's not the end of the world, so you kind of have to be careful as well. Buzzwole's a pretty good tier 2 pick. There isn't really that many tier 2 picks in general. Buzzwole's definitely the most useful one. Pretty massive defense stat in general. You know, it's just good to have. Choice Scarf, Beast Boost can snowball as well. It's not particularly fast, but with a Choice Scarf, Surprise Factor can come into effect, and you know, Buzzwole actually hits kind of hard. Ligant as your tier 3. I guess that's pretty helpful for the water matchup as well. Hustle, again, Hustle, accuracy, willing, you know, this thing actually does a lot of damage. Has Victory Dance, Sleep Powder, just a very annoying Pokemon to deal with. Has Healing Wish. Pretty good support Pokemon for fighting. You know, it's definitely better than some of the options that tier 3 fighting has. You picked up Mega Medicham, so Medicham in tier 3 doesn't really matter. Toxicroak is somewhat useless when you have a Sneasler. And then like Breloom and Decidueye Hisui as well. Lilligant is probably going to bring you the most value out of that just because of its speed tear and everything, and it does a lot of damage. Hariyama in tier 5 though. Probably your best pick, to be honest, because I also saw Machamp in tier 5. And like, they're pretty similar Pokemon, their guts boosted, similar speed tiers, similar damage output. But Hariyama does bring a lot more defensive utility. Thick Fat makes it act as a fire resist, which is going to be pretty useful in the fire matchup again versus me, because of the fact that, you know, there isn't really any fire resistance when you're running 3 fire weak bonds like Buzzwole, Lilligant, Hisui, and Cobalion. Also, Crabominable was picked up as well. Pretty interesting pick. Is in tier 5. Don't know if I would have picked it up personally. I don't really know who is really helping out. Like, if you wanted it for the grass matchup, again, you really have Sneasler and, you know, Buzzwole anyway to kind of help you out with that. So I don't know if Crabominable is the best tier 5 you could have picked up. Phalanx is there. Gerda brings a Defog as well, relatively bulky. Could have had Machamp as well, even Throw. Throw is a pretty underrated fighting type. Similar to Hariyama in a sense, but has a lot more special bulk, which the team is somewhat lacking, in my opinion. Like, you have a lot of these guys. These guys are not bastions for special defense, bro. Iron Valiant has 60 for def. Buzzwole has like 50. Cobalion has like 72. And, you know, it kind of needs investment to kind of feel bulky on the special side. Scrafty as well has high natural special defense, but the rest of these guys are not bulky on the special side, other than like Hitmonchan as well, which kind of makes up for it. That's also in tier 5. But I don't know, Crabominable could definitely be replaced in my opinion, just for something better. I think there's definitely something better in tier 5. But if you see some vision with Crabominable, just let me know. Maybe I'm not seeing it. But yeah, overall, in terms of Megas, Gallade and Medicham, pretty interchangeable, to be honest. I do think Gallade is the superior Mega just because of its higher speed tier. You know, better coverage. Like, Gallade has the move pool, but Medicham doesn't really have the move pool necessarily. Like, Gallade can do a lot with Will-O-Wisp, Teleport. Like, it just has a funner move pool, while Medicham is more one-dimensional. That, yeah, this thing is probably gonna click its stabs. Elemental punches, Thunder Punch, Ice Punch. Does it get Fire Punch? I don't think it does. But yeah, regardless, it also hits pretty hard as well. But, you know, Gallade just has the speed tier, but Psychic went before this, so obviously they took Mega Gallade, so you're literally only left with Medicham. But again, both Megas are quite solid in general. But yeah, overall, fighting, can't really go wrong with this. I just think the Crabominable pick is a bit, I'm not going to say troll, but I genuinely believe there's better tier 5 picks than Crabominable. But yeah, good draft overall. Alright guys, we made it to Smooth Operator by Ben TK. He's using Psychic this time around. I can't remember. I think he used Dark or Poison the last time I faced him in like Season 11 or Season 12. But either way, in terms of this team, so I'll say the average speed tier is 79. Again, it's not too bad. The speed tiers are pretty good, especially when you have Iron Boulder. Iron Boulder gets the jump on the 120s, 121, 123. You know, when you take into account that Meowscarada is on grass and that has 123 speed, Iron Boulder outspeeding that by 1 is pretty useful. Not that I would particularly bring Iron Boulder versus grass, but, you know, that's besides the point. The speed tier is good enough. The gaps are filled pretty well, 124 to 115 to 110 to 100, and then after that to 95. So overall, you're covering all your bases with this team. Again, the average speed tier doesn't really mean anything. I'm just using it as a benchmark to show how fast the drafts are overall. And Psychic so far is the second highest that we've had so far. Fighting is at 80.25, which is genuinely surprising because you don't think of fighting having particularly fast mons and it being a faster draft than electric, for example. But yeah, Ben has covered these speed tiers quite well in my opinion. In terms of the mons, let's talk about them. You have Tapu Lele for Psychic Terrain, which genuinely just helps out the entire team when most of these guys learn Expanding Force on the special attacking side. You know, Executor has Expanding, Armorage has Expanding, pretty sure Starmie got expanded in Gen 8, so overall you have a pretty hard-hitting Psychic team on the special side. Jirachi, you can never really go wrong with this one. There's a lot of Steel Psychic types out there, Iron Crown, Metagross, but Jirachi, it has the most utility of a move pool, to be honest. You have Stealth Rock, U-Turn, Thunder Wave, Wish, pretty sure it gets Baton Pass. Don't know if that's relevant with U-Turn, but again, like, it just has the most utilized move pool in that sense. Also has Iron Head Flinching, which you can run offensive Jirachi with, and that's definitely gonna cheese some people for sure. Jirachi is a very annoying mon, especially with a decent speed to of 100. In terms of tier 2s, like, you can't really go wrong with Jirachi. Obviously, you have picks like Bronzong as well, which I was genuinely surprised to see in tier 2, but I guess for the steel types, it is quite essential for that ground immunity. In terms of tier 2s, you also have Hooper Unbound, which would have been helpful for I don't know, like, there's nothing that Hooper could beat here. Like, there's no Ghost Draft, so you don't necessarily need Hooper. But, you know, you have some other set of ones like Necrozma, Screamtail, and the Slow Twins as well. More useful for water, but again, you have Starmie in the tier 3 slot, which is the hazard removal of the team. Not too bad. Armorage, again, you can't really draft Psychic Terrain and not draft, you know, Gen 9's poster child for Psy Spam Armorage. Like, you can't go wrong with this guy. You also have Gallade, Deoxys Defense in tier 3, Iron Leaves. Again, these guys aren't really too crazy. You know, Hatterene got picked up by Fairy, and Gardevoir was also an option as well. But when you have Tapu Lele, there's no reason to draft Gardevoir, I'll be honest. So yeah, you're picking the pretty much best slots you can in tier 3. Tier 4, Farigiraf, Trick Room Setter. Don't really know what else it really brings to the table. Like, it has Girafarig's move pool, so you have access to Hidden Power as a Gen 9 Pokemon, so I can't complain. T-Bolt, Trick Room, Nasty Plot. Farigiraf is a decent pick, but, you know, it brings that Ghost immunity, which might try and be caught out, but, like, so far, I haven't really seen anyone using a Ghost type on their teams, but my team also has a Ceruledge, so I guess having that, you know, Ghost immunity is not bad, at least from the defensive side, so you don't get exploited by your free weaknesses. But yeah, speaking of weaknesses, Psychic only really has to worry about Bug in this division in terms of type disadvantage, and you know, you have your Fire type to beat the Bug types with Armorage, you have your Steel type to take the neutral hit. You also have Galarian Slowbro, which is part poison, which resists Bug. So overall, you're having your decent time. Also with Gallade and Oricorio Psychic here, excuse me. And yeah, you're covering Bug quite well. Not a type matchup that you're too concerned about, but when you have Scarf Jirachi in the back, you're probably going to cheese like Cleavor or something else with Iron Head, so, or even Zen Headbutt in general. So, you know, you have your ways around the Bug matchup. Everything else neutrally, I think Psychic has the tools to deal with. You're going to be having a good time versus Electric in a way. Like, you know, you have Iron Boulder boosting its speed or Quark Drive. Again, might be a game where Tapu Koko is not bringing Electric Surge, but, you know, in terms of that, the extra picks, Uxie's a pretty cheap tier 4 pick, is just generally bulky, does the same thing as Jirachi, you just lack the, you know, you lack the steel typing obviously, but you have Memento, you have T-Wave, you have Yawn. Uxie's just an annoying Pokemon to kill. In terms of that, you have like one tier 1, Slowbro is tier 3, so tier 1, tier 3, tier 4, tier 5, so that works out. Oricorio Psychic. In terms of your tier 5 Psychics, I don't know, you know. Like, I don't know how useful Oricorio Pau is. I guess for the Bug matchup, you kind of need it, so I would actually put up of a higher priority. But the rest of them are kind of us anyway, like Meowstic, Jinx, Gothitelle without Shadow Tag, you know, Calyrex. Like, the rest of the tier 5 Psychics aren't good, so I guess I'll give Oricorio Pau the benefit of the doubt. But yeah, overall, you chose Mega Gallade. the best Psychic Mega anyway. Hits hard, is gonna beat Rock for you, is gonna, you know, just hit everything hard. Ground is gonna struggle to try and switch into Mega Gallade as well. But overall, Psychic is looking to be very strong. Speed is in check. Only issue for me is probably the Farigiraf's purpose on this team, but again, I did mention earlier, is a ghost immunity to not get caught out by your 3 weaknesses. But yeah, I do like this draft, and it's a pretty cool, you know, take on the Psychic draft. Alright, we've made it to water with DJS here, the Tentacle Pirates, you know, I am the captain now. But either way, so yeah, water, you can't really go wrong with it. Either you go rainless or you go rain. You know, obviously you choose rain because rain is more consistent overall and will help you out in harder matchups like electric, for example. But yeah, Pelipper is basically mandatory. I don't really think you care about not going for the rest of the tier 2s, but you ended up with Empoleon and you know, Kingdra as your tier 2s anyway. So again, you kind of got the best of both worlds. Water has a lot of Pokemon, so it's kind of hard to like pick sometimes. But when you're going rain, you're gonna go your Pelipper and you're gonna have your Swift Swimmers. You have Mega Swampert, the best Mega on the type. You have Floatzel with 115 speed, and you have Kingdra with 85 speed. Kingdra also acting as your grass and electric neutral due to its dragon typing, which is very useful to have. When I drafted water in season 11, I obviously had a Kingdra for its defensive purposes and its offensive potential in rain. I also drafted Empoleon because it's also a grass neutral Pokemon, and water really wants its grass neutral Pokemon because of the fact that when you consider your only electric immunity type-wise is Mega Swampert, and that can be caught out by a ×4, you know, HP Grass, having Empoleon as your grass-neutral Pokemon is going to be very good because it's going to take those non-stab HP grasses pretty comfortably, and it also has reliable recovery, so you can't complain. Lantern also comes on the team defensively. I also drafted Lantern. I don't think there's ever really a game or a draft where you're not drafting Lantern as your electric immunity that's not a ground type, because I think it's the only one. So yeah, unless you want to go Lightning Rod Seeking, you know, be my guest. Lightning Rod Seeking is a pretty solid Pokemon, but down in tier 5. But yeah, yeah, overall you got your necessary pieces. Ogerpon as a tier 1. Can't really go wrong with that though. You still have options like Iron Bundle as your tier 1. There's no ice in the division, so you're pretty uncontested on Iron Bundle. You also have Dracovish, very strong hitting Pokemon in tier 1 water, but Wellspring is useful for a couple of reasons. It makes ground a lot easier, even if you have type advantage versus ground. Clodsire is a bit annoying. Clodsire ain't switching into Power Whip, bro. It's just not doing that. Also is useful versus electric, as having Pokemon that's also neutral versus electric as well. Not that Ogerpon Wellspring is going to be taking a Raichu Rising Voltage, don't get me wrong, it's not probably taking that, but you know, just having another electric neutral Pokemon on water is never really bad. It generally just hits hard as well. Like again, you could have a hard hitting Pokemon like Dracovish and Iron Bundle, but at least Ogerpon is bringing something defensively to the table. Dracovish would have done the same thing, but you already have a Water Dragon type and you don't want your matchup versus Fairy to get even worse. So yeah, I can see the opinion here. Tentacruel as your, again, Pokemon that's going to be resistant Fairy for you, is grass neutral as well. Offers T-Spikes, and the T-Spike matchup is something that you have to take into account as well. Not a lot of teams are going to have grounded poison types. If we look at so far how many teams have grounded poison types here, you know, you have one here, Scolipede, you have one here, Clodsire, one here. Like, I'm not gonna lie, other than electric, nothing has grounded poison so far. Like even Sneasler here, and Psychic has Galarian Slowbro. So yeah, T-Spikes have to be respected by electric, but it seems like overall everyone has their ways around T-Spikes. I don't, unfortunately, but this is also water versus fire, so I'm not gonna be worried. T-Spikes are the least of my worries, innit? So, you know, overall Tentacle brings the secondary removal option alongside Pelipper Defog as well. In terms of speed tiers, water isn't going to be necessarily too fast. Like Floatzel is your fastest one at 115, followed by Ogerpon Wellspring at 110, Tentacruel at 100, and then overall, like, you can cover your 95 with Sharpedo, which also has speed boost. So again, you have ways of boosting your speed. You have priority. So speed tiers for water types drafts are never really a concern when you can double your speed with Swift Swim Mons. You have priority Aqua Jet, and you have a speed boost in Sharpedo. So yeah, speed tiers aren't really an issue. In terms of tier 5, Lapras, Lapras isn't bad, definitely not. Considering the fact that out of your two weaknesses, you are in a division with grass and electric, so having the ice type hitting grass super effectively is never bad. You could definitely go like Ice Beam, HP Fire to cover grass, and that pretty much does the job. To be honest, in terms of any other tier 5 waters, there's a lot of these guys. Again, water is the most frequent type in the game. Dugong, obviously you're not going to bring that guy. But yeah, Lapras. You also have like tertiary Swift Swim ones like Golduck, Seeking. Like I said, Seeking also has Lightning Rod if you're not running it under rain. And yeah, but overall the rest of the tier 5s are kind of arse, I'll be honest. So getting Lapras with its massive bulk is pretty good as well. And tier 4 waters, Sharpedo is going to be useful for Psychic. It's going to be useful for fighting to an extent. Like, it's not going to OHKO anything from full HP, but it does have access to Psychic Fangs. So you can actually hit, you know, the fighting team super effectively. And you also have Ice Fang to hit the water immunes on the ground as well, and also HP Grass. Like, Sharpedo has a respectable 95 base special attack stat. Cramorant though, very interesting Pokemon, I'll say that. I don't know if you need Cramorant. Like, if you want Swanna is also a tier 5 Pokemon, which is also faster and ups your speed tiers slightly. Swanna gets up to 97, so getting that jump on base 95s isn't actually that bad. It was Swanna 98. I think Swanna is actually 98, but yeah, overall is a typical rain draft. You have Tentacruel, not Pex. Rain Dish Tentacruel will be interesting, a la Gen 5 for example. But yeah, Cramorant is definitely giving me the question mark for me. Hazard Game is good. Rock Swampert, Rocks Empoleon, T-Spikes, Tentacruel, good removal as well. Can't complain. I do think this is a solid water draft in general. Alright, we've moved on to the Modena Leaf Bladers by Smatte. If that's how you say your name, Smatte just makes sense to me. But you know, Rock, like Bug, one of the harder monotypes to use in general. I'm not even saying that because I'm a monotype player, but it is just a hard life as a Rock player. You have a lot of weaknesses, especially if you look into this division. You have Grass, you have Water, you have Fighting, which is already 3. You have Ground, which is 4. So like, you're only missing Steel. Like, Rock has to deal with 4 of his weaknesses. So you're probably wondering, how has Smatte been able to try and handle that to the best of his ability? Because these are going to be really, really tough matchups for them to try and beat, for example. But yeah, in terms of tier 1, you're going with a Rock team without Sand. Now that is quite a questionable one from me, to be honest, just due to the fact that Tyranitar would be essential in the Psychic matchup, especially. You know, having Tyranitar be able to set the Sand to boost the special defense of your mons would be very nice. I'm not going to say Rock requires Sand, but it is something very good to have. And especially when you're basically not going to be going Mega T-Tar because of the fact that Mega Diancie is on your type. You know, like, not having the T-Tar is very, very interesting in my opinion. In terms of Terrakion as a tier 1 pick, there's only 3 tier 1 Rock types. Iron Boulder got taken by Psychic, and you know, Rock was able to take Terrakion from Fighting. But yeah, not picking up Tyranitar, especially when it's uncontested, is definitely a question mark in my head, just because Sand is so essential for the Weather Wars. Like, how are you gonna contest like, well, to be fair, Ground is probably going to beat Rock, but how are you going to contest Rain in the water matchup? At least Tita would be able to reset the weather, but you not having that, maybe you pick it up later. Maybe you swap out Terrakion for when you're, you know, doing the Tita thing, but at the same time you have to be careful of the risk of Fighting taking Terrakion off your hands. But yeah, onto the fact that there is no Sand. Like, again, there's only 3 tier 2 Rock types as well. Ogerpon Cornerstone got unfortunately taken by Grass, literally the turn before Rock was able to pick. And I do think you probably would have wanted to pick Ogerpon Cornerstone. It's definitely one of the most pivotal types on mons on the type, just because it has, you know, that Grass typing to deal with water. You know, Nihiligo is not a bad option whatsoever. I mean, it's your only option. Like, Cleavor has been taken by Rock, so Nihiligo is your only option. You can't go wrong with Nihiligo realistically. You could go Speed Beast boosting with Power Hand, Meteor Beam, can Snowball out of control. I believe you have Psychic for the fighting matchup as well. You have Psychic coverage with Psychic, so that would also be very fun to do. You're also a rock type that's not weak to fighting due to your poison typing, but at the same time you have 47 base defense, so just be careful with that. In terms of your tier 3s, I was considering Arcanine for my fire matchup, but at the same time, not a mon I particularly need, but Arcanine Hisui just hits very hard. Rock head smash, very annoying Pokemon to switch into. So the offense isn't lacking. You have hard hitting ones like Terrakion, Nihiligo, Arcanine Hisui. Aerodactyl brings that pivotal ground immunity to the type. You're obviously not going to pick it as your Mega, so you kind of just need a rock flying type somewhere, and it is the best one out of the ones that you have available, which are Minio and Archeops. So 130 speed being brought to the table, very, very good here. Cradily as your tier 4. I think Cradily, if you want to go like a balanced rock team, there's no reason not to draft Cradily, in my opinion. It's probably the best option you have in tier 4, just because of the fact it brings a water immunity via Storm Drain. So it's going to be very useful versus the water matchup as well, especially the fact that the other rock grass type got taken by grass, so you kind of need an out for water. So yeah, you definitely need Cradily here. In terms of your tier 5s, rock is not, you know, lacking in that department for tier 5s. Lunatone also offers a ground immunity as well. Don't know if I would have gone Lunatone over Solrock, for example, just because of the fact that you already have special attackers in, you know, Nihiligo and Mega Diancie, which are also going to be covering the the fighting matchup as well. So I don't know if Lunatone is more necessary here. At least Solrock offers Will-O-Wisp, which is good utility as well. A stronger explosion if you need to boom. Yeah, also don't know what else Solrock does, to be honest. It has recovery, or Lunatone also has recovery, but you know, I just think Solrock's access to Lunatone, higher defense, and its neutrality to fighting is going to be a better fit for this team for sure. Your extra picks, Lycanroc Dusk, tier 3, not a bad pick. Is better than the one in tier 4, I believe. I think normal Lycanroc is in tier 4. I wouldn't not want it in tier 5 just due to the fact that it has Sand Rush, but yeah, priority Accelerock, always good with Tough Claws. Glimora, secondary poison type, has removal with Mortal Spin, which the team other than Aerodactyl, Defog and Magic Bounce, Diancie is not particularly doing too much in terms of hazard removal. Obviously Rock is never going to have hazard setting problems. Most of these guys get Stealth Rocks. Glimora has Spikes, you know, not any issue there. It's just the removal aspect of the team is a bit lacking, especially with Aerodactyl. But like Rock isn't really known for having good removal options anyway, and most you have like Spin or Moldo. That's about it really. Like you have like 3 rock flying types, they all get defog, but you know, that's what you're gonna have to be relying on in addition to Glimora and Mortal Spin. But yeah, that's just the reality of mono rock teams. But you do have Magic Bounce, Mega Diancie, which is also a very strong hitting Pokemon as well. In terms of the rest of your picks, Barbaricle's never bad. You know, that's gonna somewhat be helpful versus ground as well due to his water typing. Shell Smash is quite dangerous as well. Especially if you get rid of Clodsire. Earthquake is not going to be appreciated at +2, especially the fact that it's going to need Water Absorb, so you know you have a way of dealing with Barbarical in general and just water attacking options. So it's not going to be running unaware, and Earthquake is going to be an obvious OHKO at +2. And you can't go wrong with Tyrantrum either. Water neutrality, grass neutrality, you know, also sets up with Dragon Dance. I think it gets Rock Polish, but you know, Dragon Dance is going to boost your damage with Rockhead Head Smash. So yeah, overall the offenses are good. It is lacking with the removal options. The speed tiers are okay. You know, you have 130 Aerodactyl to 110 Lycanroc Dusk to 108 Terrakion, 103 Nihiligo. After that is Glimora, is Arcanine Hisui at 90. So you are actually covering the speed test quite well. You have an average speed of 82.4, which is the highest so far out of all of the draft. So yeah, this rock team is not slow in the slightest. It's just the issue of you know, no T-Tar Sand, which is very questionable for me, and also the fact that the removal is kind of crazy. But overall, we'll see how well Smatte is able to do with this draft. And finally, on to the Exploding Whelmers with Zach Parrott. I'm obviously not going to be covering my own draft. I'll say a bit on my own draft after I'm done talking about the grass draft. But overall, you know, grass has to worry about bug, has to worry about fire. and I think that's all of its weaknesses in this division at the moment. But yeah, worrying about worrying about Bug and Fire. So yeah, what tools do they have to deal with Bug and Fire, for example? So yeah, you have Ogerpon Cornerstone, very strong bonking Pokemon with Ivy Cudgel, perfect accuracy. Bug is not going to appreciate taking any of those, so obviously the Charty Berries will come on deck with that. You also have Ferrothorn, which is obviously not weak to Bug due to its steel typing. On the fire side, though, you have Thick Fat Appleton and you have Thick Fat Mega Venusaur with Ogerpon Cornerstone neutral to fire. You also have a Heat Proof Sinistcha. So overall, you pretty much picked up all of your, fire, resisting options that the type has to offer. So I can't complain in that regard. I think they're gonna come into clutch in our matchup when we face each other. But yeah, other than that, what's the offense saying for this team? Again, Meowscarada, fastest mon on the type to Electric Tsui is the fastest mon, but this is like the second fastest mon you have access to. 123 base speed, pretty good. The speed tiers aren't bad. 123 to 110 to 100. I guess, like, other than those two, is kind of iffy in my opinion now that I'm looking at it, because Toedscool's never really going to be running max speed investment, but it's not a slow mon by any means. It's going to catch out the mons that are slower than it, obviously. Then other than that is like Rotom and Rillaboom, and then the rest are just kind of defensive. The average speed of this team is 68. Is let down by, some of the slower picks, especially like Ferrothorn. Ferrothorn at base 20 speed is bringing this thing down a lot. But, the defense is pretty good for Grass. Like, again, Grass didn't have to worry about over half of his weaknesses to Poison, Flying, and Ice as well, so it's not that bad. You covered Bug and, again, Fire pretty well, especially Fire with the fire-resistant options with Heat Proof, Thick Fat, and, type neutrality. In terms of tier 1 grasses, you have Kartana, but you don't really need Kartana. Meowscarada is definitely your best bet. Protein is going to allow you to hit triple Axle on ground, for example, even if, ground has access to Clodsire, for example. Knockoff is useful for psychic types. Obviously, you're going to be beating water and ground like pretty comfortably as well, like if you prep accordingly, of course. Rotom Mo is gonna be able to deal with, like, again, like, Grass doesn't really have to worry that much. This is the good thing about it. Doesn't really have to worry about too much of its weaknesses. Obviously Fire with everything again. But yeah, in terms of hazard game, you have Spikes Meowscarada, you have Spikes Toedscruel, Spikes and Rocks Ferrothorn. So hazards are not lacking, and removal is also not lacking. You have Defog Rotom, Spin, Toedscruel, Defog Tropius. Again, the Tropius is probably one of the more questionable picks, because even if Grass has a lot of shitters in tier 5, is Tropius really the best you could have done here? You have access to Eldegoss as secondary removal option. Also something with Regenerator, Sleep Powder, Leech Seed, all of that stuff. You have Gloom as well. You have Jumpluff, Leavanny for Sticky Webs, which I think would have added a pretty cool element to your game due to the fact that Ogerpon's 110 speed isn't like slow, but it's not like the fastest in the world. So having web support would have probably been useful to have over Tropius. I don't know what Tropius is really bringing to this team, in my opinion. You also have, Simisage as well. Again, like, Simisage isn't a good mon. Again, I'm listing tier 5s, but Simisage has good coverage, has nasty plot to boost its special attack, brings up the speed tier ever so slightly to base 101, so it's not too bad. In terms of Mega, you're always picking Venusaur. No reason not to pick Venusaur. I don't even think that's a discussion. You're not using Sceptile or Abomasnow. Like, come on now. But yeah. Overall, I think the team does well. You have grassy terrain with Rillaboom to kind of reset the grassy and misty terrain on Electric and Fairy respectively. Team, again, is somewhat slow outside of the top 2 mons, but you have priority with Rillaboom, Grassy Glide. You have Breloom with Mach Punch as well. Only thing here is just like the Tropius. I really don't know what that mon is going to do for you realistically. Like, again, like I listed, Leavanny is a good tier 5 for sticky web stuff. Like, at least you're forcing them to prep for the webs. And yeah, not much else that needs to be said about this draft. But yeah, It's not one of the stronger ones, I'll say that for sure. Again, there's that mono grass comparing the rest to like ground or fairy or fighting, for example. And also the Tropius, I really don't vibe with the Tropius, I'll be honest. But yeah, overall, we'll see how this draft does. I'll be excited to fight it as a fire type draft for sure. But yeah, that is it for all of the drafts other than my own. Alright guys, and finally my draft from the Clang Bangers. You know how it is, clang clang. Anyway, cool. So I'm not really gonna say too much about my draft. I do think I chose the best things I could have. My tier 1 picks were Ogopon, Half Flame. Let me get my paper for this. Yeah, so I had like Iron Moth, Ogopon, Victini, Volcarona. Like, I think Half Flame was probably going to be the most useful one. There's a water type draft and a ground type draft and a rock type draft. All 3 of my weaknesses are in this division, so obviously bringing Ogopon, drafting Ogopon was my choice. I was also 10th pick, so I was able to get Ogopon like pretty straight away, make sure grass doesn't get that option to have. Rotom Heat, I was obviously trying to prioritize having my ground immunities, because again, I'm a type that's weak to ground, and there's a ground person in my division, and Earthquake is the most common move in the game. I have to get my way around that, innit? Tier 3, Torkoal, I need Sun. Realistically, I need to reset Sand, I need to reset Rain. Like, I need a way to beat the weather-centric drafts that I have to be facing. Ceruledge was also a pretty good tier 3 pick, uncontested. Fire actually has some decent, what do you call it, tier 3 mons. I was thinking that Manitan, Incineroar was an option for Psychic. But at the same time, Ceruledge is also an option for Psychic. It's just that Incineroar is obviously immune to Psychic due to his Dark typing. Moltres was also an option I considered as well, but I do think Ceruledge is going to come into clutch. It's just one of those mons that if you let it set up or you let it do anything, like, it's always going to manage to annoy some team or something. Taurus Paldea. I definitely need this mon as a tier 4 Intimidate mon, neutral to Rock. I definitely need this guy cause versus Rock. I'm gonna need him. Definitely. Tier 5, I chose Rapidash. Like, Fire's tier 5s are really shit, I'll be honest. Like, they're not that good. And Rapidash just brings up this overall speed on my team. Has Wild Charge for the water matchup. Has Swords Dance as well. So if I'm able to set up with that, it could potentially carry some games as well. But again, I have like not many expectations for it, to be honest. It is a Rapidash at the end of the day. But I could definitely do some shenanigans with Rapidash in general. But yeah, in terms of my extra picks, Volcanion, I definitely needed Volcanion, and Water wasn't picking up Volcanion anyway. Is my Water immunity. Basically stops Fairy from also 6-0 with Belly Drum and Azumarill as well. So it's going to be a very useful Pokemon to have. Cinderace as my tier 1. I could have definitely chosen Victini. I did want to see some big damage with Banded, V-Crate, and Sun, but I do think Cinderace is generally more useful for my team. 119 speed is definitely going to come in clutch. And Libero, Protein, whatever the hell you want to call it. Being able to switch your type to target other types in the div for super effective damage is always going to be good. Having High Jump Kick for Rock, U-Turn Psychic, Sucker Punch Psychic, you know, Gunk Shot Fairy. Like, Cinderace is going to be very useful in a lot of the matchups that I'm going to be facing. Pyro and Houndoom, I'm grouping them together. They're basically the same one at this point, both tier 5 garbage. But the thing is, they have Unnerve, and Unnerve is a pretty fun ability to have in Draft League format, where berries for type reducing damage being nullified. Like, I need these guys on my team, because if I'm facing grass, well, I can't reveal my tech, man. I can't reveal my tech, but generally their coverage options, being able to ignore the type resisting berries, are very good to have. So, you know, that's why I drafted them. Pyro, having that 106 base speed, normal stab, could do some throat spray stuff, I don't know. It's the only way of probably I'm gonna find of using Pyro. And then Houndoom also helps out versus Psychic especially, and you know, has Sucker Punch as well, has some funny moves it can do. And then I chose Charizard X. In terms of Megas, I have Zard X, Zard Y, and not Mega Camerupt, which I wasn't going to draft 100%. I really wasn't going to draft that guy. But I know there's another one I'm missing, I lie. Well, obviously I had Blaziken in my head, but Blaziken's obviously banned. But yeah, yeah, so literally Zard X, Zard Y, or Camerupt. Zard Wide, uncontested. Zard X, also uncontested. And Camerupt is not a good Pokemon. So yeah, Zard X is going to bring my Fire Dragon type in. Water and Grass. No, Water and... yeah, it's just water neutrality at that point. DD, SD Scale Shot. It has a lot more stuff I'm not going to reveal because I need to bring some heat for all of my games. But yeah, that is the power rankings for the MRL Season 15 Amethyst Division. Overall, I'm not going to rank them from 1 to 10, but it's more like I know that most of the drafts, other than like Rock and Grass, are like pretty strong. I still don't... I'm not a fan of No Titar Sand, and also like... Again, the Tropius. I'm not a Tropius hater, but again, I don't know what Blood is doing on the team. But yeah, definitely some of the stronger drafts. I definitely have to say Ground. Ground, Fairy, Electric is always good. But yeah, most of the negatives I had to say, like, again, like, even for Ground, get rid of the Hippopotas, Fighting as well, and then, like, Electric as well. I'm not even trying to be biased, but, like, I feel like my draft has, like, some of the least flaws out of the rest of the draft, at least from my opinion standpoint, because I do think I chose the correct mons for the right circumstances. For example, where some of these drafts kind of just have random ass mons where I'm just like, how much are they really going to contribute to like games, like Crabominable, Tropius, even Alolan Golem. But I can understand the Electric's plight for having hazards, so you know, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. But yeah, want to thank you guys for watching this video. It's definitely going to be a long one. I've obviously cut this into parts. Really don't know how long this is going to be, but yeah, want to thank you guys for watching again, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.